walk alone. Goddamn, these city lights, they just shine so bright. They block the stars at night. The stars at night. I thought one day they'd show me the way. Well, show me the way home. Just a man, so wonderful. Thought this world could offer.
Hello, humans. Welcome back to the Slackline Quote of the Day broadcast. You are back once again with the boss.
The boss is coming.
That's a made-up dumb fairy tale name, you
And we are here chatting again quotes. We've been gone for a couple weeks, taking a little break. We are coming at you from Vancouver, Canada. Lots of stuff going on down south. Lots of firings in the White House, craziness. The protests from the school walkouts happened. Lots of stuff to talk about there. Kind of overwhelmed by it, honestly, collecting my thoughts on some of it, and we will definitely get to it later in the week. But today we are going local. There are things going on around here that are hotly debated, namely the Kinder Morgan pipeline, recently approved a couple months ago, and is now being put through Burnaby. Now being put through Burnaby and Coquitlam. I live right across the street from Burnaby. I look out my window and I see Burnaby. And but I am from Calgary, where the oil industry is king, and so I'm kind of between two worlds here. We're gonna talk about that today, but first to our sponsor, Jerry, who's bringing us the quote today. Quote brought by another quote, a fake quote. The Hypocritic Oath brings us our quote today. The Hypocritic Oath. I will hereby employ ideological means to block civic process when and only when it directly affects me and my property value. That is the Hypocritic Oath, and it is bringing us our show today. And the quote comes from a Globe and Mail article. A Burnaby resident who submitted an official opposition to the Kinder Morgan pipeline. That quote is, "As landowners who have invested our life savings in the house, we are traumatized by the impact this project will have on the quality of our lives, the value of our land and home, and the legacy we wish to leave to our children and grandchildren." That is a quote from an official opposition statement to the Kinder Morgan pipeline. The resident is named, but I don't see a reason to be doing that, because today's discussion is more about the philosophy behind the quote than it is about that specific person. Firstly, traumatized? Really? You're traumatized by having a pipeline go into land that is kind of near your house? People who witness death and torture are traumatized. Okay, people who live through terrorism, people who live through hardships are traumatized. People who live in Burnaby, Vancouver, who are opposed to a pipeline because it might drop their property value a bit, you have no grounds for using language of traumatized. And the article goes on to state that Kinder Morgan seemed pretty open to dialogue with specific complainants, and taking measures to rectify them, to a point where Habitat for Humanity actually withdrew their concerns after Kinder Morgan met with them. And Habitat for Humanity raised some concerns about green space and on the border of a bunch of townhomes it built in Burnaby. But after meeting with them, the Kinder Morgan addressed the concerns and committed to building a path for children to walk to school and protect the area around it. So, I think that is where it ultimately comes down to is a compromise. We have a larger social issue of environmentalism versus realism, and they do clash sometimes, but they can work together. It does involve compromise on both sides, though. Like the company that is violating the land and using this resource for profit, there is no doubt about that, are making efforts. They replant and restore any of the environment that they upset, agreeing to put in special measures where they need further protection or more stringent protection. That type of stuff is all happening. And I'm not going to say that the company does the best job of that stuff. I definitely will not state that. I am fully aware and not on board. I'm fully aware that that a corporation that's for profit will spend the minimum amount possible that it requires to meet environmental regulations and to meet safety regulations and stuff like that. That's I have no problem with regulations on restoration and those types of things and safety. And I am fully on board with the price of my gas and the price of my products going up in order to facilitate those things. I think that's part of kind of, rather than a carbon tax, that is our carbon tax, is paying higher prices for all the commodities that involve this resource, which is pretty much fucking everything. So that the companies will invest more in safety and environmental protection. Now, that said, they don't do those things unless people let their voices be heard. So I have no problem with activism, and I have no problem with people submitting these types of reports, because if they didn't, then people would just go willy-nilly and regulations wouldn't be a thing. I think that much is certain. But let's consider the idea of fighting against this pipeline. Now, pipelines are far and away the safest and most effective way to move oil. And I think that the idea of, alternative energy versus pipelines are two different conversations. We should use alternative energy. Using oil to burn for our fuel is stupid because we use oil for everything else. It's not just gas in your tank. It's bike tires. It's paint on it. It's polish in the furniture, it's dishes and utensils. Like, it's fully invasive, and that's reality. Environmentally, what can we do? We have alternative energy generation, so like I said, burning fossil fuels forward is dumb, yes. While we figure out how to replace it with some sort of zero impact super substance that can replace it in all of those other products, we should be fighting for safer uses, safer transportation. As while you block pipelines, the oil is still moving. It's still going places. Because we're using it. It won't stop. If the pipelines are blocked, then it moves by truck and it moves by train. Both much more environmentally impactful and less safe than moving it by pipeline. So there's a hypocrisy there of fighting against a pipeline for environmental reasons, knowing full well that it's causing worse problems on the other side. Now, another environmental issue is the oil tanker problem, and the idea that this pipeline will bring much more oil tankers to the coast and thus sending much more oil across the ocean and through pretty narrow waters, and that is definitely a consideration. I live in Vancouver. I see the horizon filled with tankers every day. Honestly, it does kind of ruin the view. I'm not going to lie. I would love it if that view could be clear of big oil tankers and be just a nice straight horizon view to a beautiful ocean sunset or something. That's not the reality. Again, it's not the reality. And me and a few of my friends standing on a tugboat in Vancouver Harbor with signs that say stop oil tankers or stop Kinder Morgan or something. It's not stopping 80 or whatever tankers coming in and out of that harbor every hour. It's just not. And as much as it sucks to see those things, there's no other alternative. And if we came up with one, let's say a trans-Pacific pipeline that went all the way across the ocean floor, or had ocean bridges somewhere, there would be uproar. Of course there would be uproar. It'd be very dangerous, very expensive, very environmentally impactful project. Long term, could argue that it would be safer than, as soon as it's completed. And yes, there would be spills and leaks and things of that nature. Would they outweigh the amount of tankers? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I haven't looked into that type of research. And I have no idea about the strength of ocean currents and how that would play into putting a pipeline across there. My guess is it's completely unrealistic, just from a structural capacity. And when you're getting into ideas like that, the idea becomes like, well, if you're going to invest, hundreds of billions of dollars or $1 trillion or something ridiculous in a trans-ocean pipeline, then there's probably better places to put that money towards alternative energy solutions and that type of thing. But these are private industries, and they're going to do what they feel is best for their company. And I think we're slowly seeing that companies are realizing that being environmentally conscious, being socially conscious, is having a positive impact on their business. We see companies boycotting. We see companies dropping NRA memberships and stuff like that in the States because of backlash from the people there. And we see changes here to pipeline putting in pipelines and how that's done, and the safety issues surrounding it and the environmental issues surrounding it. All those things are positively impacted by people speaking their voice and making a concern. But it really bothers me when people bring that concern and localize it to their own sort of selfish issue. Oh, my property value is going to go down. Like, fuck your property value. Really, fuck your property value. Okay? This is about, if you want to say that you're concerned about the trees and the animals that are there and that type of thing, I'm fully on board with that. And you know what? I shouldn't say that fuck your property value. I'm on board with that too. You have the right to protest that and to use that as a reason. I mean, like this person said, they invested life savings and a lot of work and time and effort into a house, and I was a homeowner once too, and I definitely appreciate the issues behind that. Again, my main issue with the quote today is the language of traumatized, my main issue with the quote today is the language of traumatized, as hyperbole, and the overall hypocritical ideals in some of the environmentalism I see around here in BC, and in environmental movements across the globe. And I'm not saying that that they're bad. I'm all on board with it. I really, really am. But you have to deal in the realities of how the world is working, and we can work to change them. But look at it like an addiction to anything. Okay, so we have an addiction to oil. I think that much is certain. And you can, and if you're addicted to most things, you can either go cold turkey, go through withdrawal symptoms, and depending on the substance, those can be particularly nasty, and come out the other end hopefully clean. Or you can go through programs, take medical treatments, that type of thing, slowly come around to your addiction, and move on from it that way. A lot of people would say, well, go cold turkey. Why, spend a lot of money? Why go through a lot of time and effort and, maybe something that is dubious to work because there are forces working against it, versus, just going cold turkey, dealing with a very harsh period of withdrawal symptoms, but a shorter period of withdrawal symptoms, and hopefully coming out free of it on the other side. The issue when you apply that analogy to our social structure, that withdrawal symptoms involve families, people with jobs, whole economies, collapse of industries, like that type of thing, is major and would result in death and probably riots and probably violence and all those types of Mad Max type issues that we see. Maybe not to Mad Max level, but anything that you think about as far as reactions to significant harsh change, they happen. They've happened throughout history. And so when involving a social issue and, arguably when involving personal issues, the slow and steady approach might be the better way. The compromising approach, as bad as that kind of sounds, we need to compromise on these small things as we go along, and work towards making the alternative sources the profitable sources. And I think it's slowly getting that way. A lot of it has to do with social conscience and people, overall feeling bad about having an environmental impact. And that is driving even energy companies to diversify themselves into different ways. So the pipeline is currently under construction, and we'll see how it continues as it goes along. I think that's probably it for today. We will return tomorrow, maybe talk a little bit of U.S. politics. Make sure you check out the big Slackline, which was posted yesterday after a long hiatus with Jay Wow and our guest, Dr. Zoe Arthurson McCall from Kent University in Chicago, talking about some justice and some social issues. Very interesting chat with her, and then a fun chat with Jay Wow and myself, just talking, shooting the shit. So check that out. And that quote that drove the session today from the Globe and Mail article by Laura Kane, a submitted opposition to the Kinder Morgan pipeline going through Burnaby, BC. Quote is, as landowners who have invested our life savings in the house, we are traumatized by the impact this project will have on the quality of our lives, the value of our land and home, and the legacy we wish to leave our children and grandchildren. That again, a quote from an opposition statement to the Kinder Morgan pipeline from a BC resident. And so that quote brought to us again today thanks to Hypocritic Oath. I will hereby employ ideological means to block civic process when and only when it directly affects me and my property value. That is it for quote of the day today. Thanks again to the Crooked Spies for providing us their tunes. Make sure you are following the Slackline on Instagram at the.slack.line. on Twitter at slackline_radio, and on YouTube and iTunes at the Slackline Podcast. You have been listening to The Boss.
The boss is coming!
That's a made-up, dumb fairy tale name, you
That is it for today. Everybody have a great day, and talk to you tomorrow. Bye for now.